Welcome to our peer teaching session on the cardiac cycle. In this presentation, we'll be breaking down the intricate processes that occur within the heart. We'll start by exploring its anatomy, followed by an in-depth look at the physiology that drives its function. Next, we'll dive into the heart's conduction system, followed by a step-by-step breakdown of the events that make up the cardiac cycle. Finally, we'll discuss a specific cardiac disease and how it can disrupt its vital cycle. We hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll have a deeper understanding of the heart and its complex processes that keep us alive and functioning every day. Location and orientation of the heart. The heart is a fist-sized muscular organ vital for life and responsible for pumping blood throughout the body. As the main organ of the cardiovascular system, it ensures continuous circulation to sustain bodily functions. Located between the lungs and the thoracic cavity, about 2/3 of the heart's mass lies to the left of the body's midline. It sits superior to the diaphragm, and the base of the heart is positioned posterior and superior to the right, while the apex is oriented anterior and inferior to the left, also known as the visceral layer of the serous pericardium. This is a thin and transparent layer. The myocardium is a thick muscular middle layer consisting of cardiac muscle. It forms the bulk of the heart and is responsible for contraction. The endocardium is the thin inner layer that lines the heart's chambers and valves. The heart is surrounded, protected, and held in place by a membrane called the pericardium. The fibrous pericardium prevents overstretching, provides protection, and anchors the heart in place. The pericardium also produces fluid that lubricates the heart, reducing friction as it beats. The heart has 4 chambers that regulate blood flow. The 2 upper chambers, the atria, receive blood, while the 2 lower chambers, the ventricles, pump blood. The ventricles are larger, with the left ventricle having a thicker wall than the right. This is because the left side pumps blood throughout the body, while the right side only pumps to the lungs. We will explore this in more detail later on in the presentation. The heart valves ensure that blood flows in only one direction. There are 2 types of valves, atrioventricular valves and semilunar valves. The atrioventricular valves include the tricuspid valve located between the right atrium and the right ventricle, and the bicuspid valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The semilunar valves include the pulmonary semilunar valve located between the right ventricle and pulmonary trunk, and the aortic semilunar valve between the left ventricle and the aorta. AV valves open to allow blood to flow between upper and lower chambers, while SL valves open when blood is pumped out to the ventricles. The heart pumps blood through 3 types of blood vessels: arteries, veins, and capillaries. The oxygenated blood from the body returns to the heart through the superior and inferior vena cava. It enters the right atrium, filling the chamber. As the atrium contracts, the tricuspid valves open, allowing blood to flow into the right ventricle. Next, the right ventricle contracts, pushing the blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve and into the pulmonary arteries, which carry it out to the lungs for oxygenation. After picking up the oxygen in the lungs, the blood returns to the heart through the pulmonary veins, entering the left atrium. The left atrium contracts, forcing the blood through the bicuspid valve and into the left ventricle. Now, the left ventricle, the strongest chamber, contracts forcefully, sending the oxygen-rich blood through the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta, which distributes it to the rest of the body. And just like that, the cycle repeats itself, ensuring that oxygen and nutrients are delivered where they are needed most. The heart itself requires oxygen and nutrients, which are delivered through the coronary arteries. These arteries are found in the sulci and are surrounded by adipose tissue. 2 coronary arteries arise from the ascending aorta and branch out to supply the myocardium. The left main coronary artery and the right coronary artery ensure that the heart receives the blood it needs to function properly. This concludes our overview of the heart's structure and its function.
Physiology of the heart. Cardiac muscle tissue is unique to the heart and is involuntary, contracting automatically to maintain the heart's rhythmic beating. It is striated, like skeletal muscle, and organized into sarcomeres. The cells are typically mononucleated, but can occasionally be binucleated, and their branch structure forms a network that allows for synchronized contractions. These branches are connected by intercalated discs, which enable rapid signal transmission through gap junctions and provide strong connections via desmosomes. Cardiac muscle tissue also has a high mitochondrial content to meet the heart's continuous energy needs, making it fatigue-resistant. The heart muscle forms a functional syncytium where cells work together as a coordinated unit. Cardiac muscle cells possess unique electrical properties, such as irritability, automaticity, and conductivity, that allow them to generate, respond to, and conduct electrical impulses. These properties ensure that the heart beats involuntarily, efficiently, and rhythmically. Cardiac output is the amount of blood the heart pumps per minute and is calculated by multiplying stroke volume, the amount of blood ejected with each beat, by heart rate, the number of beats per minute. At rest, cardiac output is typically around 5 to 6 liters per minute. Stroke volume is influenced by factors like preload, the amount of blood in the ventricle before contraction, contractility, the force of ventricular contraction, and afterload, the resistance the heart must overcome to eject blood. The body can adjust cardiac output to meet varying demand for oxygen by increasing or decreasing heart rate and stroke volume. Stroke volume is determined by the difference between end diastolic volume, the blood in the ventricle at the end of diastole, and end systolic volume, the amount left in the ventricle after contraction. The Frank-Starling law represents the relationship between stroke volume and end diastolic volume, stating that when more blood enters the ventricles, increasing end diastolic volume, the heart stroke volume increases, as extra blood stretches the cardiac muscle, boosting the force of contraction, assuming other factors remain constant. Starling's law illustrates how the heart adapts to varying amounts of blood flow, adjusting to meet the changing demands of the body.
Let's discuss the conduction system of the heart, which is responsible for coordinating the heartbeat by generating and transmitting electrical impulses, ensuring the heart works together to regulate heart rate and rhythm. Characteristics of the heart that allows the heart to do this includes audio-arrhythmic cells that generate the action potential. Within the cardiac muscle cells, certain structures allow action potentials to spread easily from one cell to the next, allowing the heart to work as one coordinated unit. Because the heart does not need assistance from neurons to contract, the heart needs a natural pacemaker. This is known as the SAD, muscular walls of the right and left atria, causing the atria to contract, pushing blood through the atrioventricular valves into both ventricles. The electrical signals reaches the AV node, located between the right atria and the ventricle, near the atrioventricular valve. Here the AV node delays the impulse to allow both ventricles to fill with blood. If this delay didn't happen, there would be not enough time for the ventricles to fill properly. From here, the AV node sends the impulses to the atrioventricular bundle, also known as the bundle of His, located in the interventricular septum. The impulses will continue to travel into right and left bundle branches, which branch off of the apex of the heart. Finally, the electrical impulses will reach the Purkinje fibers, where they will conduct the electrical signal to the ventricles, causing the ventricles to depolarize and contract, pumping blood out of the right and left ventricles. The electrical activity of the heart can be measured using an electrocardiogram, also known as an ECG, which can be used to clinically diagnose irregular conditions like arrhythmias and monitor overall heart function. An ECG essentially captures electrical impulses caused by depolarization and repolarization of the heart muscles during a heartbeat. Components of an ECG include the PEV wave, highlighting atrial depolarization, which refers to electrical activity that causes the right and left atria to contract. The QRS complex represents ventricular depolarization, which refers to electrical activity that causes the right and left ventricles to contract. And finally, the TEV wave, that represents ventricular repolarization, referring to the relaxation of the right and left ventricles.
Now we'll be talking about coronary heart disease, one of the most prevalent cardiovascular diseases today. Coronary heart disease is a widespread heart condition caused by a buildup of plaque causing narrowing of the main blood vessel of the heart, the coronary artery, and this reduces the oxygen-rich blood to the heart. Risk factors for coronary heart disease include hypertension, obesity, smoking, advanced age, gender, and genetics. And the condition can cause symptoms including chest pain or angina, nausea and dizziness, and shortness of breath. So how does this condition affect the cardiac cycle? So due to the narrowing of the coronary artery, there will be a decrease of blood and oxygen going to the heart, disrupting the cardiac cycle. The lack of blood going to the heart causes contractibility issues for both the atria and the ventricle. The contractibility issues will affect the amount of blood flowing from the atria into the ventricle during atrial systole. During ventricular systole, the less than adequate contraction will cause an excess of blood to remain in the ventricle, causing heart walls to thicken and become stiff, resulting in the risk of heart failure. So left-sided heart failure is when the left ventricle is unable to pump blood to the body effectively, causing blood to back up into the lungs due to dysfunction or contractibility issues of the left ventricle. And the left side heart failure can eventually lead to right side heart failure, which is when the right ventricle struggles to get oxygen blood back to the lungs.